I thought it was just a place in storybooks, but Zanzibar really does exist. Zanzibar. If the name makes it sound romantic and exotic and ancient and somehow unattainable, then it's doing its job well. As a European visitor, you feel that many things are kept hidden from you, which is part of its attraction. And hardly anyone knows where it is. But for more than 2,000 years, Zanzibar was one of the major trading ports of the world. In the 19th century, it emerged as the most important base for anyone who had designs on Africa, which lay just 25 miles away. For 200 years, Zanzibar had been ruled by the Arab state of Oman, but in the 1880s, it became first a German, then a British protectorate, as the spoils of empire were carved up. The main players in the empire game were all European. The Portuguese had first and last goes, the Germans started strongly and tired, the Belgians, Italians and French all had their moments, but it was the British, driven by the Victorian obsession for painting the world pink, who dominated the diplomatic playing board. And then the locals learned the rules and decided they'd like to play too. Zanzibar remained a British protectorate until independence in 1963, which was quickly followed by revolution in 1964. Zanzibar united with Tanganyika to form Tanzania and fostered links with China, Cuba and the Soviet bloc. Today, Zanzibar remains part of Tanzania, although there is talk of independence. Friendly relations with Britain were restored in 1979, when the Queen visited and was shown a tree planted by Princess Margaret in 1956. Although the main island is called Unguwa, everyone refers to it as Zanzibar, and the capital is Zanzibar town. Due to the narrowness of the streets, methods of getting around are very limited. So here's one I prepared earlier. The heart of the city is called Stone Town, and it's a maze. You could stay a month and never travel the same route twice, even if you wanted to. The buildings, like the people, are a centuries-old mix of African, Arab, Persian and Indian. Their language and culture are Swahili, and their religion is Islam, of the non-fundamentalist persuasion. Buildings collapse on a semi-regular basis. The place is a surveyor's nightmare, but an artist's dream. So it's no surprise that Zanzibar's most famous son this century is known for spectacular gestures rather than mundane toil. Farooq Bulsara was born of Indo-Persian extraction in 1946. He would have posted his letters here in the days before he signed them Freddie Mercury.
Freddie actually grew up in this street just along from the main post office. And it's immediately apparent that the colourful surroundings must have been a major artistic influence, until you discover that he actually grew up in the house next door. So his flamboyance must have been, well, a reaction against the drabness of his surroundings. After all, posthumous biographers can make up anything they want, can't they?
In the 19th century, Zanzibar was the staging post for the exploration and exploitation of mainland Africa. Adventurers came here for supplies and porters, and among them was Dr. Livingstone, whose unbelievably arduous expeditions were instrumental in the abolition of slavery. And when he was in town, he stayed here.
In a climate like this, where just sitting down for 10 minutes is about as exhausting as playing squash for 4 hours, it's impossible not to marvel at Livingstone's achievements. He died in the interior of Africa in 1873. His body was dried in the sun for 2 weeks before being embalmed with salt and alcohol, then carried back to Zanzibar, a trip I'm glad I wasn't a porter on. He now rests in Westminster Abbey, where at least it's cool and handy for the buses.
Famine is expected to strike mainland Tanzania this year, but it won't hit Zanzibar. There's poverty here, but not hunger. They have 10 kinds of mango, 18 types of banana and pineapples in profusion. Dogs aren't popular as pets in Islamic culture, but there are plenty of cats. If you're watching this programme with a cat and don't want it to become surly and resentful with its lot, you may wish to avert its gaze at this point. This is a traditional culture where men do manly things, then have a good wash. It's unclear whether feminism has had much impact.
I seem to remember an old slogan that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, which really wouldn't work here, where many fish do actually have bicycles. If you eat out, rest assured that the food won't be international, mass-produced, refrigerated rubbish, but will have been freshly prepared locally by skilled professionals. The narrowness of Stone Town streets offers some protection from the sun, but there's no escaping the heat. Venture outside and you roast, then melt, then fester in your own juices. Behind these doors lie cool secret rooms and hidden courtyards, I think. Everyone told me if I wanted to know about Zanzibar, I should ask a renegade New York child psychologist turned local hotelier, the honorary American consul, a man called Emerson.
The door is probably the intimation of what lies behind, the secret wealth that's to be protected behind the doors, but behind those plain walls. And the Swahili buys a door before they start to build the house. They commission a door to be built, because that's often the wedding gift of most importance, is when they do get the house, they have their door ready. The wealth is always hidden. You know, the outside of the building is usually rather plain. Someone may have a veranda on it, but that veranda is also for being in the public, but being guarded from the public at the same time. And then you go into the building, and that's where you see the real wealth. Even the idea of public modesty here is an unusual one. The Muslim women don't wear purdah. The bui, which is just sort of wrapped around so they can show the body parts that they find that they want to show off at the moment. They're still being modest, but it becomes a tool of seduction. As you watch them walk down the street, you see that the bui just accentuates exactly the parts that you want to see shake. So, public modesty has an interesting twist.
After a couple of days, at least you start to recognise things, even if you've still no hope of finding your way round. But wherever you go, you're sure to stumble on the past. Who did Bob Hope and Dorothy Lamour go on the road to Zanzibar with? It was Bing Crosby, wasn't it? The clocks were made in Germany or New York, then brought to Zanzibar to be traded for spices. And now they just hang here, gathering dust, waiting for the boom times to come round again.
Time passes, but Zanzibar stands still.
For the sultans, it stood still forever during the revolution of 1964. 17,000 people, mostly the ruling class of Omani Arabs, were killed in one night, and Marxist revolutionaries embraced Eastern Bloc values. These flats were designed by a real East German architect. The president ordered him to build a development that would look like Berlin, only with Morris Oxfords. But the exquisite old dispensary embodies more traditional values. According to surveyor Kapeldep Sami, its structure is an expression of a whole way of life.
The balcony is like your shopping platform. You can just lean over, shout instructions, drop your rope over, and get all the food stuff put into your basket. It comes out. So that aspect of the balcony is very welcome in a family, that you can actually, you don't need to go into the streets. The heat and the dust and everything that is in the streets, you don't have to. Secondly, the Islamic aspect of the keeping the house clean, that you walking around in slippers. So that aspect as well comes in the comfort of shopping from your balcony, and also exchanging goodwill and keeping a kind of interest in what goes on in the street below.
Beyond the street below, I could see Canggu Island, also known as Tortoise Island, also known as Prison Island.
The local tourist board describe it as a charming island once privately owned by an Arab who used it as a place of detention for recalcitrant slaves. These days, the big attraction is just round the corner. Tortoises as big as dodgems.
When they were building the prison, these fellas were watching them. I mean, these very ones.
They reckon that some of these are over 300 years old, which means it was less than half their lifetime ago
But they'd have met Livingstone, I presume.
I'm sure that 300-year-old tortoises wandering round a slave prison is a very potent metaphor for something, but I just kept thinking of the huge responsibility of having one as a domestic companion.
So remember, a tortoise isn't just for Christmas, it's for 4 or 5 lifetimes.
The tortoises have outlived the people who imported them, so no one really knows when or why they came. From the sea, the Zanzibar skyline is dominated by the House of Wonders. Earlier this century, the British colonial government used it as offices, and Freddie Mercury's dad worked here as an accountant. But when it was built in 1883 as the Sultan's ceremonial palace, it was one of the wonders of Africa.
Here they installed the first ever lift in East Africa, powered by the first electricity. The whole place is now being restored using EC money because, over the years, it's been allowed to gather a little bit of dust.
I'd been there a while before I even noticed the cars, an Austin, a Riley and a Zephyr, just sitting there in the middle of this giant surreal showroom as if 30 years ago someone had killed the cleaners, then thrown away the key. For a House of Wonders, this was well up to scratch. And as we were about to leave, we saw the boxes, ballot boxes, and the completed voting papers from 1963. Elections were abolished in 1964.
Probably a bit late for a recount.
Today is 30th anniversary of the Revolution Day, and it has been decreed that hats will be worn.
While the whole country's in the street outside, inside it seems to be season ticket holders only. It's emptier than Everton on a wet Wednesday.
Obviously, I had the wrong end of the stick. A little bit of lateral thinking was required to work out what was going on. It was like an inverted trooping of the colour, with the guards sitting down and the public parading. Actually, it was a rather clever way of getting everybody into the stadium and onto their seats while walking past the president and giving him a few rah-rah-rahs on the way. He loved it. And like all great ceremonial parades, it acknowledged significant moments from the nation's history.
It's a bit more exuberant than trooping the colour.
This was the middle of the dry season, but of course, this being a bank holiday, there was a spot of drizzle. Rumours of Zanzibar's burgeoning nuclear capability are believed to be exaggerated. You always think it'll be nice if it pours down when you're boiling hot, but in fact it's horrible. And then the sun comes out again and you feel like you're being ironed. And your paranoia increases because you know these trained killers are marching straight at you. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. No, they're not. The palace of Sultan Bargash, destroyed by fire in 1899. He had a famous harem with 1 permanent wife and 99 backup wives, and worked hard at elevating non-monogamy into an art form.
In effect, the Sultan was operating a squad system. The 99 second-string members of the harem would spend the sweltering daytimes out there, in the pool. Then, in the evening, they'd come in here for a Turkish bath, presumably so that they could get hot and wet again. The Sultan used to come and watch them in the pool and then take his pick for the evening. But it doesn't mean he was happy. Can't have left much time for hobbies, and a man needs a hobby. What if one of them went missing? You seen Brenda today? Yes, she's out there in the pool. I never saw her. Well, she was there. That was Jackie, wasn't it? No, it's Brenda.
At the end of the Sultan's garden, next to a beautiful beach, is a sinister and depressing dungeon. There are many of these scattered around the coast of the island. Slaves kidnapped from the heart of mainland Africa were entombed here before being shipped on to the Gulf states. The British introduced a ban on slavery in 1873, but it took many years to enforce. Apparently the spiders aren't poisonous, so that must have been some comfort then. Nungwi is the shipbuilding capital of Zanzibar, where the finest dhows in the Indian Ocean are built. This is the Harland and Wolff, or Camel Lairds of the island, as you can see from the absence of a workforce. In fact, quite by chance, my arrival coincided with a major event, the official turning on of a tap water supply for the very first time in one of the largest towns on the island. Within minutes, the Minister for Taps bowled up with his entourage and their entourage, but it didn't impress the locals. The Minister paused only to tell us that we couldn't film him, just the tap.
The queue must have been like this in Ilford the day they discovered sky dishes were going on sale.
To be honest, I felt a bit uneasy being flippant, and I can only blame the heat. Coming from a designer water and ice culture, you can feel a bit foolish in the face of a celebration of such basic needs. "30 years since the revolution, and all this time they've had to go to a well."
You can see what all the fuss was about. The well is 3/4 of a mile away and uphill. Mind you, I think some people will still find it quicker to come here, judging by the water pressure. I had a plumber like that once. I don't mean one that mooed, I mean one that couldn't get the pressure right. I did have one that mooed.
On the east coast of the island, there's still no tap water, so carrying it is a service industry. The women supply a small resort at Matenwi, while the men go out fishing in their hundreds, or train for the Tour de Zanzibar. I'd been thinking of talking to a resort operator or maybe a backpacker, so I killed two birds with one stone.
Me and my sister was coming here 89 like backpackers. And we was on the way to continue to Asia and then Japan, New Zealand, Australia, but we just fell in love with Zanzibar. So we're still here.
I don't understand. You were backpackers when you came here
Yes.
and decided to start a business here.
Yeah. We had, we had quite a lot of money with us because, I mean, the travel we was going to do was quite long and to be away maybe for 2-3 years. And that money we had, it was enough for us to stay here and to do all the paperwork and so on.
What job did you have in Sweden?
I have been doing a lot of different social works, job, I mean, with old people, mental retarded people, tourism, waitress, cooker.
All good experience for running a hotel.
Yeah. And my sister had been a lighthouse keeper and been working on cargo vessels.
But if lighthouse keepers go off backpacking to Paradise Beach, who runs the lighthouse? That is the short road to anarchy, and you'd think the sensible Swedes of all people would know it. Now, a quick word of advice on phoning home.
Don't. There's no problem getting through, but there's no problem getting through your money either. Just a quick call to England to ask someone to phone me back on a particular number costs $26 American. Look, I'm sorry, I've really got to go now. Bye.
Pricing is that $103.
How much?
Well, fair enough really, because international phone calls are irrelevant to the lives of most people here. But the basics are cheap and plentiful. The people may be poor, but they can climb up a tree instead of going to Sainsbury's. And you can get a guide who will take you tramping through people's gardens and point stuff out to you. He's just seen some peppers.
This pepper is growing as a vine of this tree.
It's a parasite that grows
That's
on other,
right.
on other
It
trees.
is parasite. And how they grow, they are growing in bunch. As you can note, some of the green one and the red one. So now you smell this, and then you tell me what it is.
Cinnamon.
That's right.
Ooh, that shocked him.
And it is a coffee tree.
These are cloves, are they?
Yes. So we pick the clove by hand.
Yeah.
And we pick like this one, a bunch. And then we separate the clove and the stem. Once we pick them, we spread on the mat, we dry them, and it takes about 3 to 4 days. It depends how it's shining. When it's completely dry, so then we can export them.
Cloves used to be so important that anyone caught transporting cuttings out of the country was executed. They've also kept a monopoly on the red colobus monkey, which are a very grey sort of red. The tourist brochures speak grandly of a national park and guides, but what happens is your taxi driver stops by a ditch and a scruffy bloke with a machete takes you into the bushes and tries to get you to come on like David Attenborough. Once again, animals melt at my presence. The 14th rule of travel. Always visit a town that has the same name as you. And this place is spelled Pete. All right, there goes. What if they shout satirical comments about my shorts in Swahili? Now, what did that mean? Fraternal greetings or crap legs? The Pete football team work hard in training, but they're hampered by a total absence of consumerism. If you run a paint shop or a lager factory, perhaps you'd like to sponsor them. Just down the road, Naila Jidawi runs a tiny resort in a fishing village. What effect does it have seeing Westerners arrive with their cameras and their Walkmans?
In a way, it is harmful because it gives them wrong values, you know. Straight away, let's say a boy of 17, you know, thinking that he can have a Walkman easily, which is not possible coming from a village. Life is very hard here, and for his parents to put dinner together would take, you know, that kind of money would be spent for about 3 months. So it's giving them false values.
Perhaps it's giving the government false values too. The earning potential of tourism was noted on Revolution Day, when the president said that they should follow the example of Spain and Cyprus, where hotels attract more than 4 million visitors a year. So, when the sun loungers and the minibars arrive, what will happen to Storybook Zanzibar?